I've been using automations in the work I do every day for over 5 years now, and I've been implementing AI and automations in my business and for my clients for over 17 months. And if I got a chance to go back to the beginning and start over again, there are three mistakes that I would make sure that I wouldn't make this time. And I want to tell you about those so that you don't make the same mistake. Now, this is a brand new channel, so I want to start out by giving a shout out to a couple of people who are friends of mine that when they found out I was going to be doing this insisted on being the first subscribers. So I want to say hello to Linda Ipe and Pete Tarudas. Hey Linda, hey Pete. Now, I'm going to be going through these three mistakes, but I first want to go over what the difference is between AI and automation because I've mentioned that before, and a lot of people don't really understand the difference. They kind of bunch them together like they're the same thing, but they aren't. Automation is something where there's a series of steps that go through the same sequence every single time, and certain of the steps can be done without an actual person doing them. You can have things like where somebody fills out a form on your website, and once they submit the form, they get an automatic email sent to them right away thanking them for submitting the form. Or they get an appointment that they book online and they get a text confirming that the appointment was set. You've probably experienced that yourself. Those are automations. That's not AI. And in a lot of businesses, those are very, very helpful. AI is something where it requires more thinking, and it's something where you may have different choices that have to be made. Like an email comes in that can either go to billing, or it can go to customer service, or it can go to sales, and a decision needs to be made. And typically that's done by a person. AI is an automation in this case that actually will send it to the correct place, but it has to make that decision. So it's not following an exact rule or path. It is something that has more judgment that it's allowed. And so there is the difference between the two, and everybody gets excited hearing about all the hype about AI and how they should implement it in their businesses. But there's an actual place for each one, for automation and for AI. And a lot of times when people think that they need AI, what they need is automation. So the power comes in understanding what each is, where it fits, and what's appropriate for the problem that you're trying to solve. Now, we have two different categories. One is cool, and that's the impressive demos that you see online and all the hype that you hear, all the shiny new features. That's a lot of exciting stuff that goes on. But then there's what's called useful, and that's where it solves a real problem and it saves people time, or it reduces the workload on things that don't have to be done by a person and can be done by some type of an automation or AI. And so I'm more interested in the useful. The cool is kind of fun, but the useful is really what's practical. And that's what the channel is about that I've started here is practical AI implementation, not the hype that you see on a lot of other channels, which is great because they get people excited about and interested in AI and some of the tools that are out there. But that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in how I can use the tools to actually get a specific result in what I'm doing. And that's implementation. So that's what I'm going to be going over on the channel in these videos is how to practically implement AI. What works, what doesn't work, what's worth your time, how to view all of this, and how to approach it. Now, the three mistakes I mentioned I was going to go over. The first one is starting with the tool and not the problem. I made this mistake where somebody would tell me about a specific tool that did a certain function, like it ran through a process, and I would go, that's great, I need to get that. I would get the tool, and then I would play around with it, but I didn't have a specific problem labeled that I wanted to use it for. So I would spend a bunch of time with it, and then somebody else would say, okay, there's another tool. And I found that the first thing is I needed to name a problem, a specific problem that I wanted to solve, and then seek the tool after that. I've been through things like at the beginning, I went through an AI certification program, which went through a lot of technical mumbo jumbo, which didn't help me at all because I didn't specify what I needed at that point. There are AI image generators, AI writing tools, and even Chat GPT Plus. They do all sorts of great things, but getting into them and not knowing what I was using them for, it was just a waste of time and money. Uh, the way to fix this is you have to realize that you don't go tool first. You see a cool tool, you get excited, you invest time and money without a clear problem, and so you're wasting money and time. The correct approach is problem first, where you list a specific problem. Like there were certain things that I was doing in my real estate investing acquisitions where I'd be doing it repeatedly, such as creating a collage of photos showing before and afters for a property that we flipped, that I'd be doing in Photoshop that would just be painful to try and fit the photos in the squares and draw the lines between them. And at one point I said, there's got to be a way of doing this faster. And I built an app that I can just drag the photos over and it places them all. And it does it within seconds instead of it taking me many, many minutes to do it. So finding the problem first and then doing the tools, figuring out the tools or creating your own tools is the best approach for that mistake. Mistake number two is you're jumping between platforms and tools because you hear from this person that this new thing does this job way better and way faster. And I see this a lot with people that I know, especially when it comes to creating videos or images. There's a lot of different tools, and things are changing very rapidly. And the problem is, if you jump from one tool to the next, to the next, to the next, you never master any of them. You're kind of doing it half-assed all the way through. And I did that to some extent. And the problem was I would start with one platform and I would do a lot of work on something, and all the work that I had was in that platform, and then I'd go, okay, I need to move to this next one, which is better. And then I'd either be leaving behind the work that I had done or having to figure out how to move it over, which would take a lot of my time. And you're going to have some of that's going to go on. And it was true for me because I didn't know. I was starting from scratch and I didn't know which ones to use. So I was taking people's advice. I didn't necessarily have experts that were my mentors at that point in time. So I was just following other people's advice, what they were doing. And they were doing the same thing themselves. And so it's good to do some research, but start using some tools and figure out what's going to be best for what you are needing to do. I had there's Chat GPT, Gemini, Grok, Claude. I've been through all of them and finally settled on Claude because it most fits what I use it for. Same thing with doing automations. I had learned Zapier years and years ago, and then I went through extensive training in another system called Make. These help build automations where steps are done one after another without you having to do them manually. And as I went through that, eventually I found a more advanced platform that let me do everything that I needed to do. But each time I switched, it cost me a lot of time. So don't jump around. You may find that you want to change at some point in time because something's more suited for what you want to do, but try to avoid the good advice or the excitement that other people share about what they're using and think that you need to now change to that. So the fix for this is just pick one, go deep, get results, then evaluate. And like I said, sometimes you're going to change after you evaluate. In other cases, you found one that you're going to stick with, and you've gotten a lot further than most people because you've gone deep and you've gotten results. The third mistake is when you build something for what you think is needed, but not something that'll get used. And I've made this mistake. I've worked with clients. I have some people that I'm working with that have an egg farm, and we're trying to get a system of putting orders into a central database. And I found that they're very busy, so they don't have time for doing anything that's too complicated, which is true for a lot of businesses. Is the people that are already working there, if you try to give them something new that takes too much time or too many different steps, they're just not going to do it. So it has to be built where the transition is going to be easy enough for the person where they will actually use it and use it on a consistent basis. And I even built an app where they could talk into their phone to say what the order was, and an automation would actually put it into the database. But I found that one person used it and the other person didn't. So it wasn't an ideal solution, even though it seemed like it was. So I see this in other people's cases where they build out some massive or complex system or tool or automation that it impresses everybody. But when it comes down to it, a week or two later, nobody's using it. So the main thing that I learned, which came from this mistake that I made, is you have to build something where people will actually use it, or it's not really a good solution. So there were things that I built, like there's a local group of business people that I work with, and we all have different tools that we've brought up at different times and shared with people. But it was like we'd ask, do you remember that thing you told me about 6 months ago? What was the name of that again? So I built an app which is like a storage vault for all of these different tools where we could each go in there and see the list of them, do a search for tools that deal with videos or deal with images or deal with automations, and it'll bring up the tools and there'll be a link to the tool, which is a great idea, but nobody uses it. And then there's the egg farm, the voice entry through an app called Telegram, which I thought was great. Didn't get used. So the fix for that is to ask and observe. Before building anything, you want to ask questions if you're doing it for somebody else. If you're doing it for yourself, you'll understand things a little bit more. You won't have to ask as much, but it's still good to observe what is it that you're doing, where do things break down, where could things be streamlined more, and then you want to start small. You want to start automating something that people just don't like to do or you don't like to do. If you try to replace something or automate something that people doesn't it doesn't bother them doing it, it's never going to get used. But if it's something where, oh my gosh, I hate doing this, if you can fix that so that it gets done more automatically and requires less time and less effort and energy, then it will get used. And then once you have something that does work, if you're doing this for somebody else, they'll trust you and they'll start looking at adding other things. And if you're doing it for yourself, the same thing. If you can see it works, you're gonna be more willing to put in the time to go through the steps, to look at what you're doing and figure out what can be simplified or automated or made more efficient. So the three things to remember that I went over is, remember, you start with the business problem, not the technology. Two, you commit to one platform and go deep and get results first rather than jumping from one to another. And make sure you build it so that people will use it, not because you think it's going to be good. So those are the main three things I wanted to go over. I'm going to be covering more of these in future videos and how specifically they apply. And I wanted to say that AI and automations are great, but they're only as great as they're put to work. Without implementation, they're just shiny objects, which is not what we need. We want something that we can put into use and it helps the business, not something that impresses other people but doesn't really do anything to help. So like I said just a second ago, if you like this video and you want me to do more like this, which I plan to do, but you can help me out by subscribing to the channel like Pete and Linda did. You can give me a thumbs up on videos that you like. If you don't like it, you don't have to do that. You can also put comments in there. All those things are very helpful. You can also put comments in as far as what you'd like me to cover. And for any businesses that want some help with AI and automation implementation, there's some links in the description below, one for an AI readiness quiz that'll help see if your business is ready for AI. And there's another link so that if you want to discuss this with me, that you can book a call and we can look at how your business is running and what might be able to be done to make it run more like the way you want it to. So thank you for joining me on this first video. It's pretty exciting, and I'm looking forward to bringing you a lot more information on how to implement AI and automations in your business. which will probably also extend out to how you can implement that in your life. Thanks again for joining me.